Caleb Morgan had spent most of his life on the same stretch of dusty land in Arizona. The ranch had belonged to his father before him, and to his grandfather before that. The wide fields, the slow-moving cattle, the distant mountains that turned purple at sunset, these were the things he knew better than anything else. For years, his life followed the same steady rhythm. Rise before dawn, feed the animals, check the fences, mend what was broken, and watch over the ranch as it changed with the seasons. He lived alone now, but it had not always been that way. There had been a time when laughter had filled the ranch house, when his late wife, Anna, hummed while cooking supper and teased him about working too hard. But that time had passed, and with it, something inside Caleb had gone quiet. He didn't talk much, except to his horses or the wind, and he didn't expect life to surprise him anymore. But over the past few weeks, something unusual had been happening, something small at first, but strange enough to make Caleb pay attention. A few cans of beans went missing from the pantry. Then a jar of honey. Later, a warm blanket he kept on the back porch was gone. At first, he assumed he had simply misplaced things. Maybe he had forgotten he used the blanket. Maybe he had moved the cans himself. Old age, he thought, makes a man forgetful. But the disappearances continued, and Caleb began to feel a quiet tension in his chest. Someone had been coming onto his land. Someone had been close enough to touch his things without him noticing. His ranch was miles away from the nearest town, and people rarely visited without sending word first. Whoever it was, they were moving carefully, and they were hungry enough to take food instead of money or tools. Caleb did not feel angry, he felt uneasy and curious. He wondered what kind of person would slip through the ranch at night and take only what they needed to survive. Whoever they were, they did not seem to want trouble. One morning, before the sun rose, Caleb woke with a feeling he could not explain. Something told him to get up and check the supply shed. He put on his boots, grabbed his lantern, and stepped out into the chilly dawn air. The sky was still dark, but a thin line of silver light peeked over the horizon. The ranch was quiet. The only sound was the soft rustle of dry grass. As he walked toward the shed, he noticed something different. A faint movement near the door. He stopped. The shape was small and quick, like someone trying to hide behind a stack of wooden crates. Caleb's breath caught for a moment. He was not a man who frightened easily, but he felt a strange mix of worry and curiosity. He did not want to scare whoever it was, but he also needed answers. So he approached slowly, his boots crunching softly on the ground. "Who's there?" he called out, trying to keep his voice calm. The shape froze. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, as the first soft rays of morning light touched the earth, he saw her clearly. It was a woman. She looked thin and tired, her clothes worn and dusty. Her dark hair was loose around her face, and her hands trembled as she held a small sack against her chest. Caleb recognized the items inside: bread, jerky, and a few canned goods from his own shelves. The woman's eyes widened when she saw him, but she did not run. She stood still, almost as if she had used up all her strength long before this moment. There was something in her expression that tugged at Caleb's heart, not fear exactly, but a kind of exhaustion he had seen only in people who had been struggling for far too long. Caleb lowered the lantern a little so its bright glow wouldn't blind her. "I don't want trouble," he said quietly, "but I need to know why you're taking from my land." The woman swallowed hard. She looked as if she wanted to speak but wasn't sure if she should. Her voice shook when she finally found her words. "My kids are hungry," she whispered. Caleb felt a sharp pull inside his chest. He had expected many explanations: desperation, wandering travelers, maybe someone who simply didn't care about right or wrong. But he had not expected this. Kids. Hungry kids. That was something a man could not ignore. He softened his tone. "Where are your children?" The woman hesitated, her eyes darting toward the line of trees near the edge of the property. The shadows were still deep there, and Caleb suddenly understood she wasn't alone. The children were hiding, watching, waiting for her to return with food. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Elena," she replied. "Elena Nez." Her voice carried a quiet dignity, even through her exhaustion. Caleb recognized the name as Apache. Many Apache families lived in nearby tribal lands, though most kept to themselves. And he respected that. He also knew life had not been easy for them. Opportunities were few, and support was often slow to come. "How many children?" Caleb asked. "Two," she said. "A boy and a girl. They are small. They are tired." Caleb looked at the bag she held. It wasn't much, just enough to last a day or two. She wasn't stealing out of greed. She was trying to keep her family alive. He thought of his own childhood, of harsh winters when food was scarce, and every meal felt like a blessing. He thought of Anna, who never let anyone go hungry if she could help it. She would not have hesitated a single moment if she had seen Elena standing there. Caleb took a slow breath. He didn't want to frighten Elena or her children. They had clearly been through enough. "You should have knocked on my door," he said softly. "I would have helped you." Elena shook her head. "People don't help us," she murmured. "Not anymore." The words stung him. It wasn't anger, he felt it was a sadness mixed with guilt. Somewhere along the road, the world had become a place where a mother felt safer stealing than asking for help. "I'm not going to turn you away," he said firmly. "No one should be hungry." Elena looked at him as if she wasn't sure whether to believe him. Her shoulders weakened, and she clutched the bag a little tighter. Caleb could see how thin she was, how tired, how much she had tried to appear strong for her children. "Are they close?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Bring them out," he said. "All of you come inside. You can eat, rest, and warm up." Elena stepped back, unsure. "You don't know us," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "No, I don't. But I know hunger. And I know kindness. If someone needs help, I won't turn them away." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sun rose a little higher, touching the land with soft golden light. It made the world look gentle for a brief second, like everything might be okay. Finally, Elena lowered her head, accepting the truth she could no longer fight. Her children needed help, and help had finally appeared. "I will get them," she whispered. Caleb watched as she walked toward the trees, her steps slow but steady. He stayed where he was, not wanting to startle the children. He felt something shift inside him, a sense that this morning was the beginning of something unexpected, something meaningful, something that would change the lonely rhythm of his life in ways he could not yet understand. He didn't know who Elena truly was beyond her name and her quiet strength. He didn't know what hardships she had carried or how long she had been struggling. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had found someone in need, and he was not going to let them face the world alone. Caleb stood near the shed as Elena disappeared into the trees. The morning light slowly brightened the land, coloring the sky in soft shades of gold and peach. He held the lantern loosely at his side, though he no longer needed it. The sun was rising, and with it came a strange mixture of concern, curiosity, and a quiet hope he didn't quite understand. He had expected many things when he walked out to the shed that morning, but he had never expected to meet a tired mother who had come only because her children were hungry. As he waited, he felt a gentle ache in his chest. He wondered how long she had been struggling, how many nights she had gone without food so her children could eat instead. He had seen hardship in his life, but he had also always had support neighbors who helped one another. A family who never let him fall too far. Elena reminded him that not everyone had that kind of safety. After a few minutes, he heard soft footsteps returning. He turned and saw Elena again. But this time, she was not alone. Two small children walked beside her. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, and a boy who looked slightly older. The children were thin, their clothes worn, and their eyes wide with worry. They clung to their mother's hands, as if letting go would make the world too big and too frightening. Elena gave them a small, encouraging smile, though her own face still showed exhaustion. "This is the man from the ranch," she told them gently. "He wants to help." The children looked up at Caleb with a mix of caution and hope. Caleb crouched down so he wasn't towering over them. "Good morning," he said softly. My name is Caleb. You're welcome here. All of you, the boy swallowed nervously. The girl stayed half hidden behind her mother, peeking out from behind Elena's skirt. It was clear they were scared. Not of him specifically, but of the unknown. Caleb wanted them to feel safe. You must be hungry, he said. Let's get you all something warm to eat. Elena hesitated again, her hand tightening around the bag of food she had taken. We don't want to cause trouble, she said. We only needed enough to keep the children strong. You're not causing trouble, Caleb replied firmly but kindly. You needed help. Anyone would understand that. The children looked at their mother, waiting for her decision. When she finally nodded, the boy relaxed a little, and the girl stepped out from behind her. Caleb smiled warmly and motioned toward the house. Together, they walked slowly across the yard. The children stayed close to their mother, and Elena kept glancing around, as if expecting someone to appear and question their presence. Caleb noticed this and walked at a calm, steady pace, giving them space and time. When they reached the ranch house, Caleb pushed open the door and let them enter first. The inside smelled faintly of wood, old books, and the warm aroma of last night's stew. The house was simple but neat, with worn but comfortable furniture and sunlight slowly filling the rooms. Elena stepped inside carefully, as though she wasn't sure she belonged there. Her children followed her, their eyes traveling over the furniture, the hearth, the shelves filled with jars and canned goods. Caleb walked into the kitchen and motioned for them to sit at the wooden table. Make yourselves comfortable, he said. I'll get breakfast started. Elena lightly touched the back of one chair, as if testing whether she was truly allowed to sit. When she finally settled into it, her shoulders sagged with relief. Her children sat beside her. Glancing around shyly, Caleb set a pot of water on the stove and began gathering ingredients: oats, milk, dried fruit, and honey. He poured everything into a pot and stirred, letting the warm smell fill the kitchen. He could feel the children watching him with quiet interest. The little girl whispered something to her mother in Apache, and though Caleb couldn't understand the words, he sensed it was something like, "Is it really okay?" Elena answered softly in the same language, her voice calm. Caleb felt honored that they were beginning to trust him, even just a little. When the oatmeal was ready, he filled 3 bowls, one for each of them, and set them gently on the table. The children looked at the steaming bowls as if they couldn't believe food could smell so good. Caleb sat across from them, giving them space rather than urging them to eat. Go ahead, he said kindly. The boy lifted his spoon first, taking a careful bite. His eyes widened slightly. The little girl followed, and soon she was eating quickly, her hunger too strong to hide. Elena ate slowly, savoring each spoonful, her expression softening with gratitude. As they ate, Caleb noticed how thin they were. The boy's wrists looked fragile, and the girl's cheeks were hollow. He wondered how many meals they had gone without. It made him more determined to help them. After breakfast, the children grew more relaxed. The boy asked Caleb questions about the ranch, how many horses he had, what the cows ate, whether he ever saw mountain sunsets from his porch. The girl, still shy but curious, smiled whenever Caleb answered gently. Elena watched her children quietly, and for the first time since Caleb met her, he saw a bit of peace in her eyes. When the children finished eating, Caleb washed the dishes, while Elena tried to stand to help. You don't need to, he said softly. You're guests. She hesitated but finally sat down again, folding her hands in her lap. You've been very kind, she said quietly. More than we expected. You needed help, he replied. That's enough reason. Elena looked down. People don't always feel that way about us. Caleb nodded slowly. He didn't deny it. He knew there had been misunderstandings, unfair judgments, and divisions between communities. But he also believed kindness could rise above all that. What matters, Caleb said, is doing what's right. And right now, you and your children need a safe place. Elena met his eyes. We didn't want to steal, she said softly. I tried to find work. I tried everything. But the children were getting weaker. I didn't know where else to go. Caleb felt that same ache again. He imagined her carrying both children through long miles, maybe sleeping under open skies, maybe rationing whatever food she found. She wasn't a thief. She was a mother trying to keep her family alive. You did what you had to do, he said gently. And now you're here. Let's focus on helping you get back on your feet. Elena looked at her children, then back at Caleb. We're grateful, she whispered. More than words can say. As the morning continued, Caleb showed the children around the ranch yard. The boy touched the wooden fence and asked many questions about the animals. The little girl stayed closer to her mother but smiled when she saw the horses grazing peacefully. Caleb felt warmth spreading through the ranch, the kind of warmth he hadn't felt since Anna was alive. Their presence made the place feel less empty, less quiet. He realized how deeply loneliness had been sitting inside him all these years. Later, he invited them inside again and set fresh water on the table. Elena looked at him with a quiet, steady gaze. "Why are you helping us?" she asked in a soft voice, not out of suspicion, but sincere curiosity. Caleb thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because you needed someone to show kindness," he said. "And because everyone deserves a chance to rest when they're tired." Elena nodded slowly. It seemed to touch something deep within her. The children leaned against her, full and content for the first time in a long while. Caleb watched them and felt something shift inside his heart, a feeling he hadn't expected that morning. It wasn't pity, it was something gentler, something hopeful. When he had first caught Elena at the shed, he thought he was discovering a thief. Instead, he had discovered a story much bigger than that. A story of love, struggle, courage, and a mother doing everything she could for her children. And now he felt certain of one thing. Their journey was about to change, and so was his. Caleb had always believed he understood the rhythm of life. Days passed in quiet patterns, feeding the animals, checking fences, repairing things that wore out with time. He thought he knew everything that could happen on his ranch. But the presence of Elena and her children changed that rhythm in the gentlest way. It was as if a soft breeze had moved through the empty halls of his home and lifted the dust that had settled on his heart. After breakfast that morning, Caleb walked outside to check on the animals, as he always did. But this time, he felt something different, a lightness, a sense that he wasn't entirely alone anymore. When he glanced back toward the house, he saw Elena standing near the doorway, her children by her side. They were watching him with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty, unsure if they should follow or stay put. Caleb waved them over. "Come," he said with a warm smile. "Let me show you around. You're welcome here." The boy stepped forward first, eager to explore. The little girl held her mother's hand tightly, staying close. Elena walked slowly, still cautious, still unsure of how much she could trust this new kindness. But she followed him with quiet dignity. As they approached the corral, the horses lifted their heads. The boy's eyes lit up. "They're so beautiful," he whispered. Caleb chuckled softly. "Would you like to pet one?" The boy nodded eagerly, and Caleb guided him to a gentle mare with a soft brown coat. "This is Daisy," he said. "She's one of the sweetest animals on the ranch." The mare lowered her head as if she understood that the boy needed reassurance. He reached out a small hand and touched her nose, smiling for the first time that morning. His sister watched with wide eyes, slowly loosening her grip on Elena's hand. "It's okay," Elena said softly to her daughter. "He's kind." The girl stepped forward, her small fingers brushing against Daisy's neck. Caleb felt his heart warm at the sight. Moments like these reminded him why he had always loved ranch life. The simplicity, the honesty, the connection between people and animals. As the children explored, Caleb noticed Elena watching them with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She looked as if she had carried the weight of the world on her shoulders for too long, and was only now beginning to set it down. "You've been walking a long time, haven't you?" Caleb asked gently. Elena nodded. "Too long," she admitted. "The children tried to be strong, but it has been difficult. Food has been scarce, and the nights are cold. I didn't want them to suffer." Caleb's voice softened. "You did everything you could. You should not blame yourself. But Elena looked away, her eyes full of unspoken worries. A mother always feels she must do more, she said quietly. He understood that feeling. He wasn't a parent, but he had seen his own mother sacrifice for her family. He knew that Elena had been carrying burdens far heavier than any bags she held. As the morning turned into afternoon, Caleb guided them toward the barn. He opened the doors to reveal the cool, shaded space inside. Stacks of hay filled the corners, and the faint smell of leather and earth clung to the air. The children marveled at everything. The boy examined the tools with interest, asking Caleb questions about their purpose. The girl played with a stray piece of hay, letting it tickle her fingers. Elena, meanwhile, stood quietly near the barn wall, taking everything in. You can rest here any time you want, Caleb said gently to her. There's no need to hide or worry. Elena hesitated, her eyes soft but unsure. You barely know us, she said. You don't have to help. Caleb leaned against a wooden post and took a deep breath. Maybe I don't know everything about you, but I know enough. I know you're a mother trying to protect her children. I know you didn't take more than you needed. And I know you didn't deserve to struggle alone. Elena lowered her head. Sometimes people think we are different, she murmured. Not worth helping. Caleb felt a pang of sadness at her words. You're not different in the ways that matter, he said. Everyone needs food. Everyone needs shelter. Everyone deserves kindness. Her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Kindness is something we haven't felt in a long time, she whispered. Caleb wanted to say more, but he let the moment rest. Some feelings didn't need long explanations, they only needed space to breathe. Later that day, Caleb prepared a simple lunch, fresh bread, beans, and fruit. They ate together in the kitchen, the children smiling shyly at each bite. The warmth of the meal spread through the room like sunlight. After they finished eating, the children drifted to the small living room. The boy found an old wooden toy horse that Caleb had carved years ago. The girl curled up on a chair, clutching a soft blanket Caleb handed her. She closed her eyes, clearly exhausted. Elena sat at the table, looking more peaceful than she had all morning. The tension in her shoulders had eased a little. Caleb poured her a cup of warm tea and sat across from her. Do you have a place you were trying to reach? He asked. Elena nodded slowly. My husband's family lives far from here. I hope to reach them. But the journey has been harder than I expected. Caleb could imagine the long miles, the uncertainty, the fear of running out of supplies. You don't have to hurry right now, he said softly. You can stay here until you regain your strength. Elena lifted her eyes. That is generous, she said. But we do not want to burden you. You're not a burden, Caleb replied firmly. There's plenty of room. And it's been a long time since this house has felt alive. Elena looked around the room thoughtfully, understanding what he meant. The empty spaces and quiet corners told their own story. She saw the traces of a life once full, pictures on the mantel, worn spots on the floor where someone had once stood often. She felt the loneliness that had lingered here. You miss someone, she said softly. Caleb nodded. My wife, he answered. She passed some years ago. Elena's expression softened. I am sorry. She was kind, he said. She always believed in helping anyone who needed it. Elena looked grateful but said nothing. Her eyes drifted to her children, who were now fast asleep, one on the couch, the other curled at its foot on a folded blanket. They are safe here, Caleb said gently. Let them rest. Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing. Thank you, she whispered. You've given us more than food. You've given us hope. Those words touched Caleb deeper than he expected. Hope had been missing from his life, too. But now, with this small family in his home, he felt something returning, something that made the house feel warmer, brighter, more alive. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, Caleb realized something important. Helping Elena and her children wasn't an act of charity. It was something his heart needed just as much as they did. He hadn't expected to feel this connection or this renewed sense of purpose. He looked at Elena, who gently brushed her daughter's hair while watching over her son. She was strong, patient, and full of silent courage. Her presence filled the room in a quiet, comforting way. Caleb knew then that he didn't want them to leave too soon. He wanted to give them a chance to heal, and he wanted to feel this warmth in his home just a little longer. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. A simple act of kindness had changed everything, not only for them, but for him as well. The days that followed felt like a gentle change of season, slow but warm. Like spring quietly pushing winter away. Caleb noticed it first in the mornings. For years, he had woken to silence, the kind that pressed against the walls and reminded him of how alone he had been. But now, when the sun touched the ranch, he could hear soft footsteps, quiet voices, and the laughter of children who were beginning to feel safe again. Elena and her children slowly settled into a rhythm on the ranch. They did not stay still, nor did they expect everything to be handed to them. Every morning, Elena rose early and helped with small chores. She swept the porch, washed dishes, or folded laundry. Her movements were graceful, careful, as if she was afraid of taking up too much space. Caleb had told her she didn't need to work, but she insisted. She believed kindness should be earned with gratitude and effort. The children followed their own curious path each day. The boy, whose name Caleb learned was Tahoe, loved exploring the land. He watched Caleb fix fences, water the animals, and stack hay. He asked questions about everything, eager to understand how the ranch worked. The little girl, Nita, stayed closer to her mother at first, quiet and thoughtful. But slowly, she grew more comfortable. She loved the horses most of all, especially Daisy, who seemed to sense her gentle nature. Caleb enjoyed having them there more than he expected. Their presence didn't feel like a burden, it felt natural, as if the ranch had been waiting for their footsteps. He noticed how the house held their warmth, how the sound of children playing filled the empty spaces that had once felt cold. But the outside world was not as welcoming. One afternoon, while Caleb repaired a broken section of fence, a neighbor named Mr. Harlan rode up on his horse. He was a man Caleb had known for years, a decent enough fellow, but set in his ways. When he spotted Elena and the children helping gather small pieces of wood near the yard, his expression tightened. "Caleb," Harlan said, pulling his horse to a stop. "Who are those folks on your property?" Caleb wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "Guests," he said simply. "A family who needs a place to stay." Harlan frowned. "They ain't from around here, are they?" "No," Caleb replied, keeping his voice even. "But they're good people." Harlan didn't look convinced. "You ought to be careful. Folks talk. They'll wonder why you let strangers stay with you." Caleb felt a quiet firmness rise in him. "Let them talk," he said. "Kindness isn't something I need to explain." Harlan hesitated, then nudged his horse. "Just looking out for you," he muttered before riding off. When Elena heard the conversation, she stepped toward Caleb with worry in her eyes. "We don't want to cause trouble," she said softly. "If your neighbors disapprove, we can leave." Caleb shook his head immediately. "You're not going anywhere. People will always have opinions, but opinions don't feed hungry children. You and your family belong here as long as you need to." Elena looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are kind to us. We won't forget it." Caleb smiled gently. "And I won't forget what your family has brought back into this house." The next few days were peaceful. The ranch felt alive in ways Caleb couldn't fully explain. In the evenings, they sometimes sat together on the porch, watching the sky change colors as the sun dipped behind the hills. Elena would share small glimpses of her past stories about her husband, about life before things became difficult, about her family who lived far away. She spoke quietly, choosing her words with care, and Caleb listened with genuine interest. The children played in the yard during these moments, chasing each other or following butterflies across the fields. Sometimes Nita would sit at Caleb's side, leaning quietly against him, as if she trusted him completely. Tahoe would ask about the stars or the names of distant mountains. These simple moments braided themselves into Caleb's heart, filling spaces he hadn't realized were still empty. One morning, while the sun was just rising. Elena came out carrying freshly washed clothes. She looked peaceful, her movements steady and calm. Caleb watched from the porch as she hung the clothes on the line. The early light touched her hair, and for a moment, he saw her not as a stranger, but as someone who belonged on this land. She noticed him watching and gave a small smile. "The children slept well," she said. "They feel safe here." "I'm glad," Caleb replied. This home needed laughter again. Elena paused, her eyes soft. "You've given us more than shelter," she said. "You've given us a place where we feel cared for. That is something rare." Caleb felt a quiet warmth at her words. "You've brought something back too," he said. "I didn't realize how quiet this ranch had become until you arrived." As days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew naturally, without force or expectation. Caleb never tried to replace the memory of Elena's late husband, and Elena never tried to fill the space of Caleb's wife. Instead, they shared a gentle understanding, two people who knew loss, but had found comfort in each other's presence. The children adapted quickly. They helped with chores, learned small ranch tasks, and showed their mother they were thriving. One day, Tahoe managed to help Caleb calm a young horse that had been restless. Caleb praised him, and the boy's face glowed with pride. "I want to learn everything," Tahoe said excitedly. "I want to be strong and helpful, like you." Caleb placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You already are," he said with a smile. Nita blossomed too. She began humming softly as she played, a habit that reminded Caleb of Anna, whose gentle humming had once filled the ranch house. It made him smile in a way he hadn't in years. One evening, a soft rain began to fall. Elena and the children sat inside by the fire, wrapped in warm blankets. Caleb joined them, carrying cups of hot tea. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the room. "This feels like a real home," Elena said quietly. "My children haven't felt this calm in a long time." Caleb nodded. "Homes are made of people, not walls," he said. "And you've brought life back into mine." Elena looked down at her hands. "Sometimes I worry this peace won't last," she admitted. "Life has taught me not to trust good things for too long." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "Good things do last," he said gently. "Sometimes they come when we least expect them." The children fell asleep that night near the fire, their breathing soft and steady. Elena watched them with quiet love before turning her gaze to Caleb. "I wish we could stay forever," she whispered, almost as if afraid to speak the words aloud. Caleb felt his heart tighten, not in fear, but in recognition of the truth he already sensed. He didn't want them to leave. "Not now. Not ever. You're not guests anymore," he said softly. "Not to me." Elena's eyes shone with emotion. She didn't speak, but her expression said everything. She felt it too, the bond, the comfort, the sense of belonging. It was a connection built not on need alone, but on respect, kindness, and shared healing. As the rain continued to fall gently outside, Caleb realized that fate had brought this family to his doorstep for a reason. They needed a safe place, and he needed something too: purpose, companionship, warmth that had been missing for far too long. In the quiet glow of the fire, with Elena's presence beside him and the children sleeping peacefully nearby, Caleb understood that his life had changed in ways he never expected. And deep inside, a new hope began to grow, one that felt steady, gentle, and full of promise. The days on the ranch continued to pass gently, each one weaving itself into the next, like threads of a soft, comforting blanket. Elena and her children had now been with Caleb long enough that the ranch felt different in every corner. It seemed brighter, more open, as if the land itself was grateful for their footsteps. Even the animals behaved more calmly, sensing the warm energy that had settled over the home. Caleb found himself waking up each morning with a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. He no longer rose to an empty house or a quiet table. Instead, he often heard the soft voices of the children in the next room, or Elena humming quietly as she prepared something simple in the kitchen. These sounds made the ranch feel alive in a way that words could not describe. But one cool morning, As they all sat together finishing breakfast, Elena spoke words that made Caleb's heart sink, even though he tried not to show it. "We should leave soon," she said gently. "My husband's family has been expecting us. They will worry if we do not come." Nita stopped eating and looked up at her mother with wide, uncertain eyes. Tahoe shifted in his seat, his shoulders drooping. They both understood what the words meant. They would have to leave the ranch, leave the safety they had found, leave the man who had shown them kindness when they needed it most. Caleb felt a quiet ache form in his chest. He set down his cup, trying to steady his voice. "If you feel it is what you must do," he replied softly, "I won't stop you." Elena nodded slowly. "You have been more generous to us than anyone. But I do not want to stay longer than we should. My heart is thankful, but I must think of what comes next for my children." Her words were filled with love and responsibility, and Caleb respected that. But inside, something was shifting, something he had been trying to ignore ever since the day he met them. He cared for this family deeply. They had changed his world in a way he couldn't explain. For the next few days, Elena prepared quietly. She packed the few belongings they had, folded the clothes she had washed, and helped the children gather their things. She didn't speak much during those days, and neither did Caleb. He worked around the ranch with a heavy heart, knowing their departure was getting closer. The children felt it too. Tahoe stayed close to Caleb, helping with every task he could, even small ones. He asked fewer questions now, as though he was memorizing everything he could before he left. Nita became quieter and often held Caleb's hand when they walked near the animals, as if she wanted to hold onto the comfort she had found with him. On the evening before they planned to leave, a soft sunset spread across the sky. The colors blended in shades of rose and orange, warming the hills and fields with a peaceful glow. Caleb invited Elena and the children to sit on the porch with him, something they had done many times before. Nita curled up beside Elena, resting her head against her mother. Tahoe sat on the porch steps, watching the horses graze in the distance. Caleb leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Elena looked out at the land, her eyes calm but full of emotion. "Your ranch is beautiful," she said softly, "and peaceful. My children found joy here. That is something I will always remember." Caleb nodded. "You brought something precious here too," he said. "You reminded me what it feels like to care again." Elena turned to him slowly. "We were strangers," she whispered. "Yet you opened your home to us. You trusted us when no one else would." Caleb looked into her eyes, full of sincerity. "Trust comes from the heart, and my heart told me to help you." For a long moment, they simply watched the sky together, listening to the quiet around them. The children, feeling the emotional weight of the moment, stayed close and silent. The next morning arrived much too quickly. The sky was pale and cool when Caleb stepped outside to feed the animals. He moved slower than usual, as if each step felt heavier. He knew that by midday, Elena and the children would be walking away from the ranch. When he returned to the house, he found them ready. Their small bags were packed. Elena stood near the door, her hands folded tightly. The children stood beside her, dressed and quietly waiting. Caleb felt his breath catch slightly. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "There's no rush. You're welcome to stay longer if you need." Elena met his gaze with soft, steady eyes. "You have done more for us than anyone," she said, "but I must take my children to our family. They deserve a future, surrounded by those who share their past, their traditions." Caleb understood, yet his heart struggled to accept it. He walked them to the edge of the ranch where a narrow dirt path led toward the distant hills. The children held Elena's hands tightly. Nita looked up at Caleb with a trembling smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Tahoe stepped forward and hugged Caleb suddenly, wrapping his small arms around the rancher's waist. Caleb froze for a moment, surprised by the gesture, then slowly placed a gentle hand on the boy's back. "You've been brave," Caleb said softly, Take care of your mother and sister." Tahoe nodded, blinking away tears. Elena stepped forward last. Her face was calm, but the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. "I will never forget your kindness," she said. "It healed us when we needed it most." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "You gave me something too," he replied. "I didn't realize how empty my days had become until you filled them with your warmth." Elena looked down at the path, then back at him. "If fate allows," she whispered, "perhaps our paths will cross again." And then she turned to leave. But as she took the first step, something inside Caleb felt wrong, deeply wrong. He took a breath, then another. And before he realized he was speaking, his words broke through the quiet air. "Don't go." Elena stopped. The children paused too and looked up at their mother. Caleb stepped forward. "Not because of charity," he said gently. "Not because you need help anymore, but because you belong here now. You and your children have brought life back into this home. I don't want to lose that." Elena turned fully toward him, her expression filled with surprise and emotion. She searched his face, trying to understand what he truly meant. "You mean, stay?" she whispered. "Yes," Caleb said softly. "Stay, if you want to. This ranch is big enough for all of us. And my heart has room for all of you too." Tahoe's eyes brightened with hope. Nita squeezed her mother's hand. Elena looked between her children, seeing the longing in their faces. Then she looked at Caleb. "You have given us safety," she said quietly. "You have given us comfort. But more than that, you have given us a place where we feel valued." She stepped closer. "If we stay, will we be welcome as family?" Caleb nodded, emotion shining in his eyes. "As family," he said. "Completely." A soft breath escaped Elena's lips, half relief, half joy. She looked at her children, who were already smiling, their eyes full of light. "We will stay," she whispered. Caleb felt warmth spread through him, gentle, deep, and comforting. The weight that had been pressing on his heart lifted as if carried away by the wind. Elena and her children walked back toward the ranch with him, their steps light and full of hope. The house that once felt empty now felt complete. The land that once held silence now held laughter. And the heart that once felt lonely now held purpose. They had all found something precious, not just shelter or kindness, but a new beginning. Sometimes, life brings strangers to our door for reasons we do not understand. And sometimes, those strangers become the family we never knew we needed.